Hi everyone, and welcome to the second video on lessons from Capablanca. This time we're going to have a look at pawn endings. As I said in the last video, Capablanca was an expert at the endgame, and in Chess Fundamentals, his book, he gives the exercise in front of us now for the reader to solve. It's white to play and win, and there are many moves that lead to a win, but the most important thing to note is that playing f6 would result in a draw, because now black has king g8, and not g takes f6, because now comes king takes f6 and white will win, as we saw explained in the last video. So king g8, and if now f takes g7, now comes king takes g7, which leads to a draw again, as we saw in the previous video. And if at this stage f7 check, now comes king f8, and white will never be able to queen his pawn here without losing it. And also, back at this stage, after king g8, if white plays king e7, now comes g takes f6, king takes f6, and king f8, which also leads to a draw. So, back to the start again. King d7 is the correct move for white to secure the win as quickly as possible. Black's only move now is king g8. Now comes king e7, again giving black only one move, king h8, and now it's correct to play f6, and it's mate in 4 no matter what black does. G takes f6 delays the mate for as long as possible. If instead king g8, now it's mate in 2 with f7 check, king h8, and f8 queen, and mate. So g takes f6, and now king f7, which forces black to push his pawn because he can't move his king. So f5, and now it's a simple mate in 3 with g7 check, king h8, g8 queen check, king h6, and queen g6 is mate. Okay, on to the next example. So, it's white again to play here, and there's a couple of moves that are the correct way to continue. If you want to try and spot the best one, then stop the video now. The important thing to note is that playing g5 would be a blunder, because it would lead to a draw as opposed to a win for white, because black can now play g6, and with his king opposing white's king, there's no way for white to get by and win the game, and meanwhile he can't push his pawns. And I'll come back to that concept of opposition later in the series. So, back to the original position, and f5 is one way for white to secure the win. Black's best answer here is g6, but it's still an easy win for white. However, the best move for white in the original position is king e4. And now black would probably play king e6 as the best move. If instead g6, now comes king d4, and white can win the pawn on g6 as follows. Say for example king e6, king c5, king f6, king d6, king f7, g5, which forces the black king back. So say king g7, and now king e7, king g8, king f6, king h7, king f7, and this pawn is going to fall on the next move. So, king e4 and king e6. Now the best move is f5 check. King f6, king f4, and g6 from black, because if he doesn't play it, then the position will transpose to what we saw in the first example in this video with a simple win for white. So now white has g5 check, king f7, f6, king e6, king e4, king f7, king e5, king f8. And in this position here, it's impossible for white to force through his f-pawn and queen it and win the game. It's impossible for him to do. If he pushes it, there's stalemate risks, because the king can get trapped here, and meanwhile it can keep the opposition. The correct method is to sacrifice it in order to win black's g-pawn, and then queen with the remaining pawn, this one here, on g5. So best play now continues. f7, and king takes f7, now king d6, king f8, king e6, king g7, king e7, and see the white king is forcing the black king into the corner. King g8, king f6, king h7, king f7, and again it's the same technique to win that g6 pawn. And now with king g8, but even here white has to be careful because there's still some resistance in the black position. The correct move is king h6. If instead king f6, black now has king h7, and white has to waste time getting the position back to how it was, because playing now g6 check leads to a draw after king h8. So king h6, now say king h8, g6, king g8, g7 forces the king out of the corner. Now king h7, and white will queen the pawn and win easily. After this section, Capablanca writes, "This ending, apparently so simple, should show the student the enormous difficulties to be surmounted, even when there are hardly any pieces left, when playing against an adversary who knows how to use the resources at his disposal. And it should also show the student the necessity of paying strict attention to these elementary things which form the basis of true mastership in chess." So, that's the end of this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave any comments or thoughts. Thanks very much.